Hey friends, welcome back to another video. My name's Emma Lefebvre, and today I just painted. I tried something that has been in my brain for a bit, and I didn't know if I could make it, put it on paper, and I didn't know how exactly I wanted to put it on paper, but I had this reference photo, which I will show right here, and I just kind of looked at it and thought, you know what, that might be fun and also extremely challenging to paint. So I'm gonna do it, and I did, and it turned out okay. Is it the best thing I've ever painted? No. Is there more detail that I could have probably added to it? Yes, I just don't know where I'm going with this, but it was fun, and I mixed watercolor and gouache to create this and ended up with this kind of tree landscape winter scene, and I think I'm pretty happy with it, but I figured I'd just show you guys what I did and kind of walk you through it so you'll hopefully enjoy it and paint along with me too. So let's jump in and get started. Okay friends, so today we are creating that fun snowy landscape. I am using my Paul Rubens watercolor block, my Winsor Newton professional watercolors, and right here I am starting by using my flat wash brush. And to start this, I am just taking a bit of yellow and orange, and I'm creating the sun, the horizon line, if you will. I didn't wet the paper first, I just started by laying down this color. So some of this video is going to be sped up. Just because it did take me almost an hour to paint this, I think, so I didn't want you guys to be sitting there for a full hour. But some of it will be in slower motion so I can explain what I'm doing. When you're creating a sky like this with a horizon line that's yellow and then blue towards the top of the sky, you don't want them to mix in the middle because then you will be creating a green color, which you don't want a green sky. So I started off with that yellowy orange color, and it was the most vibrant towards the horizon line. Then as I started to bring it up, it was lighter in color. Then I completely wash off my brush, grab my blue, I think I used a bit of cobalt blue and there might have been a bit of purple in there, and I start at the top, and as I move my way down, which I'm doing now, I barely have any color on my brush because you don't want to mix that yellow and blue. Okay, so I just did a very light blue at the top, it's not that vibrant. Now I'm going to create the sun by lifting some of that color. I grab my size 6 round brush, and it is completely clean and a bit damp. It's not a lot of water, just damp, so I can lift a little white sun using that brush. Okay, and you can see that I'm just kind of lifting it by just dragging it across, creating this circle, and then I use my paper towel to lift more of that color, and you get this really bright white sun. I also found that this color lifted really well. I think it's called transparent yellow, maybe? I don't even know. Okay, and then next, I took my flat wash brush and I grabbed kind of like a rusty orange. So I'm just mixing a little bit of that yellow, and there was a bit of red in there, and I'm just trying to create this orange background, which in the reference photo looks like it could be mountains. And the reason why it's orange is because the way the sunlight is hitting it. So I'm just kind of creating this rusty orange. I think I added a little bit of burnt umber in there as well. But one thing I loved about this reference photo and trying to create this piece is all about that light and the lighting of how it's hitting the background, the trees, and when you think of snow, you think that it's white, but when you create all this light and shadow, you really realize that the light is kind of more of an orange or a pink, and the shadows turn blue or purple, which is really beautiful. So here now is where I'm creating those sun rays. I just washed off my brush, my flat brush, and made sure it was really clean, but it's still damp, and I'm just dragging the damp, clean brush across that background, which is still wet, just the orange part that I laid down, and it's lifting that color and creating these beautiful sun rays. So the lifting technique really allows you to create beautiful lighting in these paintings. So that was one thing I really wanted to achieve. The only thing I would change, I think, is making that orange background a little bit lighter towards the sun, and as I move down below, I would have made it a little bit darker, just so there was a bit of more of a gradient, but I was just playing around and learning. And then I just tried to remove some of that color at the bottom, even though it doesn't really matter. We paint over it. It's all good. Okay. So now I want to move on to the next part, but before we do that, I have to let it completely dry. Okay, so now that it's dry, I am going to grab a pencil and possibly mark out where I want my trees, like super light so you don't see any pencil marks underneath, but even so, it doesn't really matter because I end up using gouache with a lot of the trees, so you can just paint right over that. I just kind of wanted to place where I was going to put the trees. Now, because we're focusing on the lighting in this painting, you want to make sure that where you're placing your trees, especially the ones that are closest to those sun rays, they're not going to be dark in color there. Actually, where the sun's hitting it, it is going to be the lightest in color. So just keep that in mind. So before I did that, I wanted to kind of lay down some of that light in the snow. So I'm using a little bit of yellow, a little bit of orange, because if you actually look at the reference photo, which I will place here again, the places where the sun is hitting on the white snow is colored. It is not white. It is yellowy, orange, and even some pinks are in there. And then where the shadows are hitting the white snow, you're going to see these intense kind of like cobalt blues or ultramarine blues. So I'm just laying down first where the sun is hitting the snow, and then I'm adding just a little bit more color where there might be a bit of shadows. Okay, then I decided to go in and start with the trees. So when we're thinking about trees, we're thinking green, right? But when the light hits it, it's actually not green. If you were to zoom in to a reference photo and actually kind of do that little color drop tool, you'll see a lot of it is not what you think it is. So you might think you're looking at a green tree just because of what our brain knows, but actually the way light and shadow hit objects completely changes it. So I'm using my flat brush and this kind of rusty red color just as a base to kind of map out my tree. And I am placing some kind of tree branches in there, and you're going to see there's going to be lots of holes in this tree. And that's because I'm kind of also trying to map out where I want to put the fallen snow that lays on those branches. So I feel like I should have looked at the reference photo a bit more just to place that stuff, but I just decided to wing it with this. I love making trees, and I just wanted to kind of play around. So see how it's not even a full tree? I'm really just putting in where those shadows are going to be where there is no snow. So I'm leaving a lot of white space where you see the background, and I'm just kind of mapping it out to start. I did switch to my round brush just because I found it was a little bit easier to get some of those little strokes better than my flat brush. So I'm just continuing to do that. But yeah, I would say look at a reference photo maybe just to see where the snowfall is. And because I do use gouache with this, it's not a huge thing. You could always just paint your full tree with all the branches, and then because gouache is an opaque medium, you can just layer the opaque paint right over top of the parts where you want the fallen snow, and it should cover it quite nicely. I kind of wanted to just avoid that just so I could map it out in my mind and place my shadows in first and just get kind of an idea of what I was doing. There's no right or wrong way to do this. This is just the way I decided to do it. So I'm just going to let you kind of watch how I map it out. And then you'll see me go into my right side of the trees, which are further away, so they're a bit smaller, and they're also going to be slightly lighter in color. So these two trees that I'm working on now I'm adding in a bit more, I think it's a dark brown for the shadows because it's really dark underneath those branches of fallen snow. But the ones that are further away are going to be lighter in color, and those sun rays are actually going to be hitting it more. So you'll see I'm going to be using a lighter orange to do those trees. But just kind of watch and see how I go about all of this. Okay, so as I go through the trees on the right side, take note of the colors that I'm using. So those small ones that are in the distance, I'm using a very light orange, kind of like a rusty orange. And then the ones that are a bit further and then further down the paper are going to be darker. And I also made the shadows on the right side of the trees because the light would be hitting on the left. Here I'm just adding another tree because I felt like it needed a bit more. But where you place your shadows and your light really makes a picture look more realistic. So then once you've done the base of those shadows, let it completely dry, and I'm going to start marking in some of the blue shadowy snow. So I just use a bit of cobalt blue and I think a little bit of my dioxazine purple for this color, and I'm just laying down a light layer. And I don't want it to be too stark of a difference from the light to the shadows on the ground, so I just add a little bit of water in my brush and then kind of just blended it together just so it's not so harsh. And then here I'm adding in a little bit more purple to where the shadows are going to be. You'll see that I end up using more gouache to cover all these areas anyway. I just kind of wanted to mark it out to start because I myself am figuring this out of where the shadows go and what colors to use. So now I decided I wanted to go in with gouache. This is done with watercolor. I wanted to layer on some thicker, more opaque paint, so I'm using my acrylic gouache by Holbein. And I squeezed out a lot of white, a little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of primary magenta, and primary yellow. Then I started mixing and adding in my snow. So I started by adding a little bit of the ultramarine blue and white, more white. I wanted it on the lighter side just to kind of gauge the actual color. And I'm using my gouache brushes from Sarah Burns. And I'm just, like I said, I'm doing it lighter because gouache dries darker usually, and I'm still kind of learning how it behaves. So I want to go lighter just in case it dries too dark, and then you'll see I gradually make it darker. Okay, so now for the color of the snow on the trees. Our shadow areas are going to be blue, and then the light snow is going to be kind of this lighter peachy pink. Okay, and it seems weird, snow is white, but by the way that the snow hits it, this is kind of how we do it. Okay, so you can see I also added in some purple. I wanted a bit more purple on the snow. I really love the blue, but I felt like these shadows just seemed a bit cooler and moodier as they were more purple. So I'm adding the purpley blue shadows to the right and the left side of the tree, depending on where the sun's hitting. The sun's coming through the middle, so the trees on the left-hand side, you're going to have the shadows on the left. Trees on the right-hand side, you're going to have the shadows on the right. Hopefully that makes sense. And then here I added a little bit of the primary magenta, white, and a little bit of yellow to make the snow on the light side of the trees kind of pink. It's very light and bright, but it's amazing what our eyes can do to trick us, to making us seem like, you know, something is actually a white object when it's really colored. Like you look at it and you know that's snow, even though it's purple and blue and pink. But it's amazing what the eyes can do to kind of trick you. So I'm just going to slow this down a little bit so you can see a bit more of the strokes. They're very messy. They're not anything special. I'm just kind of slapping that color on there. And now I'm taking a little bit of that pink from the light side of the trees and just going down this little trail of light on the snow on the ground. The one thing with this painting that I found really difficult was adding detail to the bottom half of this painting. I felt the trees were really fun to do, a little bit more easy, but the bottom half of just the snow on the ground, I was, you know, struggling with. And I think in the end, I might just crop it out because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. That's a little light area that's supposed to be peeking through the trees. I found that looked out of place too. But you'll see I'll add a bit more detail. So it looks pretty good, but I really want to deepen those shadows. And the snow that we have on the trees is kind of the medium color. I want to deepen some of the shadows on the trees and also highlight some of them. So this is the medium kind of wash, and then we're going to do a darker one. So let's do that. So here is where I'm going to take just the plain ultramarine with very little white, and I'm going to start placing even deeper shadows in the snow. And this just really makes it pop. And also I love this ultramarine color on its own. It's probably one of my favorites. So I'm adding it to the bottom and then also underneath some of the fallen snow on the trees just to make it a little bit more 3D. So I'm just adding that darker color right underneath the trees where there would be the most shadow, and then adding it to the underside of the fallen snow. And then here I'm just doing a little bit of like line work just for little bits of, I don't know, shadow. I'm like I said, I'm just playing around. I don't actually know what I'm doing completely. And then I want to even deepen the shadows on the actual tree parts, not the snow. So here I'm taking black, and I think it is burnt sienna, mixing it a little bit together, and I'm going to deepen some of those parts on the tree. I really want those shadows in there so the light of the snow will really pop out. And I'm just using a really tiny brush so I can get a bit more of those, you know, pine needle strokes. And I'm going to do this to all the trees that are the closest to us, and then the ones further to us, just a slight bit of darkness. You don't want it too dark because, again, they will be lighter because of that sun hitting it. Same with this tree that I'm working on now. I'm not making it as dark as I am to the one that is to the left of it. Okay, so now I'm doing the shadows on the trees on the right. For this one, I had more burnt sienna on my brush rather than the black, just to make it a little bit lighter because there's more light hitting these trees, as I said, and I'm just making it really light to the ones that are far away. You don't want too much shadow because you really want to give the illusion that those are a lot lighter. Okay, so now I'm just taking a little bit of burnt sienna and adding it to some of the branches that are directly in the sunlight's path, so you can see that the sun is hitting it and you get this nice light warm brown for some of those detailed branches. And then finally for this piece, I'm just taking a little bit of white just to add a bit more highlight to some of those areas of snow. Adding the white, it's not going to come off as just like a stark white. It's just going to come off as some highlights. I'm adding it mostly towards the pink light sections, but just a little bit on the blue. You don't want to add a lot of white there, just because then it won't show as much shadow, but just on the pink, just a little bit, just for that extra little bit of brightness. And honestly, that's about it. That's as far as I went with this painting. I felt like there could be more detail to be done. I could have deepened some of the snow shadows a little bit more, but I just wasn't completely sure. Maybe I could have added a little bit more detail to some of the shadows with the black. I don't know. This is all new to me, but I'm kind of just trying to explain the concept of light and shadow when painting, and I'm hoping it makes sense and looks decent enough for you to want to try, and that's about it. So there's my painting. That's it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow me on all my other platforms for tons more content. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.